All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming and welcome to today's live learning event on AI generated documents. This is part of our Grooper Dev Notes series, which is designed to give you insights and information on all of the newest Grooper innovations. Today, we will explore AI generators and XML Transforms AI helper tool, which helps you work faster by taking tedious work off of your plate. Thanks for joining us. My name is Brad Blood, and I will be the moderator for today's event. If you've got any questions, you can always send them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Sometimes it's hidden at the very bottom right of the screen. It says more with a little circle. Sometimes it's hidden there, so you can find it there sometimes. And as you send those questions in, we will get those taken care of as time allows. Or we will also record this meeting, and we'll be sending out a link to it to everyone who register for today's event. We'll also be adding this recording on the Grooper YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe to Grooper AI on YouTube to never miss a thing. All right, today's speaker is Dylan Greenwood, the Director of Product Operations here at Grooper. Dylan is dedicated to educating Grooper users on the possibilities of intelligent document capture. With a background as an educator, his aim is to increase the understanding of the Grooper platform, leading to effective and efficient document processing solutions. His work includes a lot of things, including designing Grooper University coursework and a ton of documentation on the Grooper Wiki. If you haven't been on the Grooper Wiki, be sure to go and check it out because it is a great resource that is updated daily, basically. So Dylan is responsible for all of that stuff. And without any further ado, Dylan, take it away.
Thanks, Brad. So today, like Brad was talking about, we're going to talk about Grooper's capability to generate documents. Traditionally, in terms of Grooper's place in the document processing world, it's all about capture, right? You scan documents in, or you import files, you run them through a batch process, collect data, organize them, yada, 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 export the data and the documents wherever you want. But recently, we have introduce some capabilities to actually use Grooper to generate certain types of documents. And for those of you who have been coming to these series regularly, you've actually already seen this. A couple of months ago, one of our sales team members, Logan, demoed a really interesting kind of out-of-the-box use of Grooper that he developed to start with, basically data review, collect data, kind of use that as almost like a purchase requisitioning workflow where you collect some purchase requisition information up front. It gets routed to people who approve the requisition, might get routed back to the person doing the initial information so they can provide more information. And then towards the end of the Grooper process, Grooper actually builds a PR document. And I got some feedback from several of the people who were in that webinar wanting to know a little bit more about how Logan did that and more about the two main tools he used. So one that we will talk about towards the back half of the webinar is the Grooper's XML Transform AI helper to help users generate what's called an XSLT transform, which is the main tool he used to generate the document in the batch process. But I also believe he showed you something really cool in terms of Grooper's search page functionality. So this is the series of documents that Logan created in his webinar. As you can see, they are a number of purchase requisitions. Again, Grooper created this document using that XML transform capability that we'll talk about a little bit later. So each one of these were generated basically from whole cloth, just off of collected data. But once you put documents into a search index, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do in terms of generating report-style documents using something called an AI generator. And I believe he showed you this off. He used an AI generator to create something like this. So given that document set that was returned from the search page, he was able to generate basically this report and give you some high-level information that you might say, in this use case, communicate up to leadership. Summarizing requests from various types of employees here, give you some averages and some other kind of high-level details. So I'm going to show you how to create a document similar to this using AI generators first. Any questions before we continue, though?
Nope, I see none so far, but everybody, be sure to send those in, and we will get all of your questions answered as time allows.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to get started with a pretty simple use case here using our trusty rusty example of invoices. So I have generated some mock documents for us to play with in this webinar. And what I've already done here is sent a few, fake invoices through a simple process that just collects the data from them and puts them in a search index. So if we go back to our search page, we can see they've already been processed, and I've already got, actually, we'll just query them all. I already got, a selection of these invoices already indexed in my search index. So what I want to do using these documents is create a scenario where a user might be able to search for high-value pending invoices and then just generate a simple report about them. So that's going to be our big goal. Use the search page and AI generators to generate essentially a report detailing high-value invoices that are still pending in this search index. All right, well, let's get started. So I've got my invoice report document type here, and I'm going to go into the behaviors to configure an AI generator. AI generators are part of configuring the indexing behavior. They're only accessible from a search page for a document index, so that's where you configure them. So here I've got the indexing behavior for that invoice report document type. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see in the search page settings the ability to configure one or more AI generators. And we're just going to get started pretty simply here with a prompt I already have built out. So I'm going to copy this out, and this is going to form the basic instructions of the document that I want to generate. So I'm going to tell the AI basically, exactly what it says here. Create a report for high value pending approvals for invoices in the search stat. Then I'm going to give it some other information, for each invoice, list these certain types of fields that we've already collected. I told it to sort by amount in descending order, and then I gave it some other information I wanted on this report too. Real simple stuff. If the same vendor appears more than once, flag it and show their combined total exposure. That might be important for somebody in a accounting department to know, oh, hey, we got this one vendor and we got several pending invoices for this amount, right? Kind of sum that up for them so that, they don't have to do math themselves. Great. And then finally, just a one-line total at the bottom, right? Okay. So that's going to be our prompt that we use to tell the AI what we want in that report. I'm going to go back into my generators settings here, and we're going to add it. So first thing I'm going to do is just, give it a simple name. This will be important later. You will want it to be a name that, basically describes the report that somebody can identify on site later. So I'm going to call this high value pending approvals because that's the nature of this report, right? Model, you can pick any of the available models that you have exposed to you from your LLM connector. So obviously I'm connected to OpenAI here. So I can select any of these OpenAI models. Now, you might be asking yourself, okay, well, which model is correct? Generally speaking, if you've got a fairly uncomplicated type of document that you're generating, you can get away with a pretty baseline model. You might end up needing a higher model if the document you're creating is one more complicated, similar to the document that Logan created. I'll give you a quick example here. He created this using GPT-5.1. Not the most complex model that OpenAI has, but certainly in the newer 5 series of models, and it was able to do a pretty good job. Obviously, this is a fairly complicated document. It analyzed a lot of data, did a lot of stuff, right? I will show you by comparison, if he chose to use GPT-4.1, it doesn't look so great. A less capable model in this case produced just frankly a poorer looking document. If we analyze the data inside, it's basically saying the same information, but when it came to understanding all of the styling that Logan wanted to do, it did less of a good job. So that is certainly one of the considerations you'll want to make when picking a model. How, for lack of a better word, pretty do you want the document to be, or how complex is it? But in our case, let's get back to where we were. I've actually tested this using GPT 4.1 and does honestly a pretty good job. Also, 4.1 runs pretty quick, which will be good for the purposes of getting through this webinar. So I'm just going to paste in those instructions that I copied out earlier. I'm going to adjust the spacing a little bit just to make sure it's easier to read. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to hit OK again. I'm going to hit OK again. I'm going to save all that. And let's test it out. So I'm going to go to the search page. And I've already got this query pre-built. So this is one of the kind of key features of AI generators in the search page. You can use both in concert, right? It's not like I'm going to return every single invoice in this index. If you imagine this is a real world scenario and I've got maybe hundreds, thousands of invoices in this index, that's a really big set to create a document against. You're going to do a lot better if you use the search page's filtering capabilities in concert with the AI generator. And we have a very targeted report we're trying to build here, right? High value pending invoices. So invoices whose total is greater than a certain amount and whose approval status is pending. It's exactly what this filter is doing for us. Turns a relatively small subset of documents that we can use to generate this report. Okay, to use this generator we just created, you're going to select this set of commands. These are kind of the commands that apply to a result set that is returned from a search query. And the one we're going to want to use is this download feature. This is a command that creates a document of a certain format. So I'm going to clear that out. And you can see there's all sorts of types of documents you can create. You can download a CSV from the data in that index. You can download a PDF, download a zip, just zip up all the documents together. But where AI generators are exposed is this download custom option. Once you click that, Grooper is going to allow you to pick any of the generators that you have configured for this indexing behavior. So we only have one, so we can only pick one. Pick that. Hit download and let the AI do its thing. So it's taking that prompt that we gave it against the documents in this search result, and there it already generated the document. Now, see here, it generated a text document. This is probably not what I really wanted to happen, but it's important to show you off that if you don't give the assistant any instructions on the type of document to build, it's always going to build just as a text document from default. Now, this may be good enough. I mean, this is a high-value approvals report. It is sorting them by amount in descending order. All the information is here. It flagged, hey, I've got this vendor that appears more than once in this set. It's giving us the total dollar amount. It's giving us a final total amount for all of the pending invoices here. It did everything we told it to do, right? That being said, though, a text report's kind of hard to read. I much would rather have, something like the document that Logan generated, which is HTML. It is formatted in a way that is very readable. Well, hey, at the end of the day, HTML is just a text file. And we can absolutely get an AI generator to do that. We just need to tell it, make me an HTML file. So I'm going to go back and just make that quick adjustment, and you'll see the results instantly. Simple instruction here to add to my list of instructions. I'm just going to tell it, create an HTML document. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to hit OK again. I'm going to hit OK again. I'm going to save, go back. Let's see what we get now. All right. It'll take slightly longer to build the file because obviously HTML is more text than just raw text, but didn't take too long. Made that document. Let's open it up. Okay, cool. That's a little bit more readable, right? A little bit easier on the eye. Gives us all that information. But you know what? It's still not quite as pretty as the one Logan made. It certainly would be nice if I could say, yeah, close that document. Sorry, guys. That document that you created was fine, but I'd really like it formatted a little bit better. It would be great if I could give you an example of what I want this to look like. Turns out you can do just that. So I had Claude help me out a little bit here and worked with it to basically produce an example of the kind of report that I wanted to create. And, we landed on this. That's a lot prettier, for lack of a better word. But it communicates the information visually much better, in my opinion. tells us how many invoices are flagged in the documents in scope. It gives us our total exposure here, tells you how many vendors are flagged, gives you all the line items, gives you that, hey, we've got some combined exposure here very clearly and that total very clearly too, right? So now that we have an example, all we have to do is tell the generator to use that example. All you have to do there is just go straight to the HTML source for that HTML document. We'll go back into the generator settings, and this example property here is going to allow us just paste in that HTML as an example. Oh, shoot, I forgot one key thing here. Sorry, guys. The other thing to pay attention to, let's do one thing at a time. We'll come back to that. So now that I have that example in here, run that query and regenerate this document. And it is going to use that example document in building its response. Long story short, now that we give it, something that it should style itself after, it should do a better job of, making a report that is more like the style that we expect. Okie doke. And hey, there we go. Looks pretty much exactly like that sample that we gave it, and has, this one vendor that appears multiple times flagged with its total summed. Basically all of the instructions that we gave it are being followed. Now, I'm going to close that out, and I do want to mention something that, may or may not have had too much of an impact in this case, but easily could in a real-world scenario. I want to talk a little bit about document quoting. So in this, actually, I should say, is there any questions before I get into this?
No, none so far. Remember, you can send those into the Q&A box at any time at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer those right away.
Perfect.
Thanks, Dylan.
So in this generator settings, you may have noticed that there is a document quoting property. All of Grooper's LLM-enabled features have this document quoting capability. It basically controls what gets sent to the AI in terms of document content. So you obviously send the instructions, you can send the example in this case, but then you also have to send the document itself, right? If you leave this blank, you're just going to send the raw text of the document to the AI. And, these are pretty small invoices. In our case, it really wasn't that hard for the AI to kind of extrapolate all the data that it needed to generate the report based on the raw text. But you can also use already extracted data for more complicated documents, longer documents, or documents where you need to just explicitly send extracted data rather than the raw text, which is really what I should have done to begin with. So if you choose this data values options, it's going to allow you to select data elements from the data model. And this is really all the AI needs to do or needs to have to answer the question, or more explicitly, to generate the document. It doesn't really need the full text of the document. It really just needs the extracted data in a kind of standard format. So if you do things this way, it's going to send that extracted data as JSON, as the document content, rather than the raw text, which in a lot of cases, if that's all you need to use to generate the document, is really the best way to do things. If you just need the data to generate the document, that data values quoting method is really, really, really going to work out very well for you. It's also, particularly if you have very long text-heavy documents, probably the raw text of the document is going to be more tokens than the formatted extracted data, which is going to save you time and money, long story short. So yeah, even though these two things, there we go, do and changed a little bit, I bet this is the more technically accurate result as well. Because again, the AI only had to go through the data and not necessarily the raw text. Okay, any questions about that before we go on?
No, none currently.
Okay, I'm going to show you one more example from our AI generator examples before moving on to our XML transform helper. I know we're kind of running out for time, but I like this one because it illustrates a very, very different document set. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just real quick. We had a question come in. Can you generate multiple reports at once?
Can you generate multiple reports at once? No, you would need to generate them basically sequentially. But You can configure, as many AI generators as you want. As we'll see, this one actually has 2, and you would just have to generate them basically one at a time. So this litigation chronology is a interesting example. So for this, I generated basically a bunch of different types of documents, all relating to some kind of case file. So there's a bunch in here from a bunch of different cases. And the idea here is, you might be, some sort of legal advisor or, clerk even, that has to take a bunch of different kinds of documents that illustrate essentially a timeline. So let me go back to a different index here. So here I've kind of simulated, okay, we're able to know the case number for all of these documents, but they're detailing a bunch of different email messages. They're detailing, possibly some official letters between 2 entities. And I'm trying to build essentially some kind of chronology because I'm going to have to litigate something involved with these documents. Long story short. Okay. This is something that I, a human being, probably wouldn't want to do. I wouldn't really necessarily want to go through each one of these documents and say, okay, this happened on this date, and here's what happened, and put together a timeline. It's boring. It's tedious. That is something that an AI can do very effectively and very, very quickly. So I'll show you the result of this litigation chronology report, and it'll actually do probably a better job than me in terms of showing you what it's doing. A few more documents in the set, so it's taking it a little bit longer. And one of the things I should mention is, in this case, our quoting method actually is set to that default because I didn't really extract any data from these documents, as you'll see down here. This is a kind of, especially when you're talking about natural language, sometimes, you can't always extract things reliably in terms of, structured data. But our document here was able to do a really good job still putting that chronological record together. You see, we had 9 documents in this set, and it put them, essentially in order of start to last. It generated a very, very nice summary at the top. This is all done from instructions that I gave, as well as an example, and kind of punctuated some of these events with particular kind of flags up here. So this is litigation around something happening to do with a missed purchase order. So, hey, we got a deadline missed. Hey, there's a formal notice sent. We got another deadline list, yada, 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 yada. And then at the bottom, it summarized this case posture, something like a legal investigator may be able to use as kind of a starting point. Okay, we're running a little bit late here, but there's one more thing that I do want to show you guys, because this is a question I get asked often when it comes to these AI generators. So these 2 examples that I just showed you were obviously pre-configured, right? I gave in the AI generator settings, pretty explicit instructions about what I wanted it to do. So, sorry, let me find where I'm at here. Yep, that's where I want to be. So these were those settings, right? I gave it very explicit instructions, and I gave it a very, very explicit example. So one of the questions I get asked a lot when it comes to these AI generators is, well, what if you don't know ahead of time what kind of report you want to generate? What if you want to generate something on the fly? Can you do that? And the answer is yes. Short answer is yes. If you don't have a very, very specific report that you want to generate, given very specific explicit instructions and even a very explicit example, you can do something like this. So this is an AI generator that I've called user entered. And all I've done here is I've given it a model, and I've given it very, very, very simple instructions. Your job is to create an HTML document based on the user's instructions. That's it. We don't know what those instructions are because the user hasn't entered them yet. When it comes time to using this generator, there is a property called special instructions whenever you're using this download custom command. You'll see I set that user enter generator, just using that very, very simple instruction to build an HTML document. And then our special instructions can be the user saying whatever they want to do. So I could even tell it, build a case chronology from these documents. Now, obviously, it doesn't have those very explicit instructions on the other generator that I made, doesn't have that example document to style it exactly how we wanted, but it is going to do what I asked it to do. So if you are wanting to kind of build a report on the fly, this is a cool trick that you can use. Basically add a very, very generic AI generator with very, very simple instructions and use the special instructions box to build something on the fly. And again, it doesn't look exactly like the other one we created, but it is a case chronology. It did what we asked it to do. Okay, guys, we ran a little bit later than I thought we would. We're already hitting at 11:30, and we haven't touched the XML transform side of things. So I'm thinking we'll probably split this into two and continue on next month. Any objections to that? Everybody okay with that?
I think probably so, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's bank on that. We saw the first part of AI generated documents, giving you some examples about AI generators, how to configure them, some kind of tips and tricks in terms of explicitly stating the type of document you want to return. So if you want an HTML document, ask for an HTML document. We talked a little bit about, models you might want to use. Once you are looking at generating complicated documents, you might need a kind of beefier model, one of the later 5 series if you're using GPT models. But, if you got a pretty simple document, you can probably go with a 4 model or even a mini model. We also talked about giving an example document. If you really, really want explicit styling, particularly for an HTML document, kind of want the look and feel to remain the same every time. And we talked a little bit about using different quoting methods. If you just want to use document data, use the data values method. If you just want to use the raw text, then the default quoting method will work for you. Next month, we'll go ahead and continue on with the second half of what I plan to do today, talking about the XSLT transform helper and using XML transform to generate documents in a batch process. Before we totally wrap it up for today, though, do we have any lingering questions from the crowd? I'm happy to stick around a little bit and answer them.
We'll see if any come in. Feel free to send those in here in the last couple of minutes, and we would like to take those on and make sure that y'all have any questions or anything you're wondering, whether it has to do with this or maybe something slightly different. Just send them. So send those in now, and we would love to answer those. But, thanks, Dylan. Those were some great insights. Everybody, thanks for joining us today. We hope that this has shown you how to get better results with less grunt work. And next time with Dylan, we will talk about XML and how to use that. Remember, we'll be sending out a link to this recording here either tomorrow or Friday, and we'll add it to the Grooper YouTube channel. Please rewatch this video or share it with anybody who might benefit. And if you want to learn more about how Grooper can help you all do things faster and with less work, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Dylan, or anyone else on the Grooper team. Until next time, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.